This edition of the Ridley Report is brought to you by LRN.FM. Feds don't want you to hear them. More under the radar, and not necessarily under the radar, New Hampshire news. Over at the reopennh.com Facebook group, someone has posted a sign, or posted a picture that kind of says it all. The town of Durham has put up it has a sign up that says, it's a long-term sign that's been there for a long time. It says, "Town of Durham, a welcoming community." Now, it has a second sign next to that sign that says, "Wear a mask. It's the law." I don't know if a city or if a town ordinance counts as a law or not, but that's what they say. Durham, New Hampshire. That's the virus that's spreading, is these mandates. And outside New Hampshire, a couple of grim milestones have been achieved that they are worth noting on this New Hampshire podcast. This hyper-focused on New Hampshire podcast. The first police killing over failure to wear a mask has now occurred. I don't know the details. I heard just a little bit about it on the Free Talk Live Digest. That's a truncated version of the liberty-leaning talk show Free Talk Live out of Keene, New Hampshire. However, it's so truncated that you often don't really know what's going on and miss a lot of information. It seems like Free Talk Live itself is too slow-moving and the Daily Digest is too fast-moving. I guess I'll just go back to listening to the whole show. Preferably at double speed or something like that. 30% sped up or something, if I can figure out a way to do that, like I used to in the old days. Anyway, if you just Google police kill man mask, you'll probably find the news. If Google isn't hiding it. Additionally, the first libertarian activist I know of has been gunned down by someone, also as part of this overall descent into chaos that the world seems to be going into slowly. So this was a Texas activist. I was thinking he was like a Libertarian Party activist or something, but I'm not sure. I don't know his name. Going off memory here, apparently he was alleged to be carrying a firearm, a rifle, at a Black Lives Matter event around late July 2020. Other folks claiming he wasn't. I don't know how you can get that one wrong or have two conflicting stories about that, but there's also conflicting claims as to whether he considered his girlfriend to be at risk by an approaching vehicle, whether he pointed a rifle at the vehicle. His girlfriend was in a wheelchair. Apparently, whoever was in the vehicle gunned him down and killed him. This was in Austin, and the Libertarian Party presidential Joe Jorgensen has been talking about it. So, not a lot of facts for you there, but enough for you to have a takeaway and do a Google search. A start page search. That's what I use. I try to use start page as my default browser since I don't trust Google to be ideologically objective in taking me places. And start page is oriented toward privacy. I find I wind up having to use both sometimes. A New Hampshire activist named David Leroux, I think I'm saying that correct. He's been leading what sort of roving protests around the state, going from town to town. I guess what he's doing is targeting towns that are considering mask ordinances and doing protests against the mask ordinances. His most recent one, I think, was in Keene on August 15th. He was, I guess, only able to get to that after the mask ordinance had been passed. Speaking of those two killings I mentioned earlier, You know, the mainstream press may not be a terrible place to get information about those particular events because they don't have as much of a dog in the fight. But one thing I'm noticing is I'm just trying to get general scientific information and medical information from the world, from the internet. It's so difficult these days to figure out, you know, who do I go to trust for information? It seems like everybody's got a dog in the fight and everybody's information gets contested. Traditionally, I have felt like Free Talk Live and Keen is really the best place to get my news because they're not conspiracists, they're not necessarily knee-jerk deniers. You know, they allow conspiracists to call in without censorship, and they'll allow people sometimes to co-host who have conspiracist leanings. To me, that's kind of more representation than it is, you know, it's like equal representation as opposed to super promotion of a particular view. However, as the COVID thing has gone along, Free Talk Live folks have such a dog in that fight, and even I have such a dog in that fight. It's hard for any of us to be objective and rational and just scientific. But on the other hand, I'm a little nervous about going to mainstream press for that kind of stuff too. I did a start page search to determine, you know, what the internet thought was the most accurate place on the internet. The best I could come up with was a claim that you would want to go to The Atlantic, The Guardian, and Live Science. Or Life Science? I can't remember which. I don't know much about this science place, but, you know, I can't say that The Atlantic and The Guardian have ever really let me down, so, okay, maybe. At least The Guardian's not in the U.S., if you're if you're trying to get your U.S. news. You want to get it from someplace that's outside the country. But preferably not, you know, well, probably not Press TV or RT. I don't know, maybe. RT does seem to be pretty good about reporting, you know, American news from Russia. Press TV isn't, I mean, it seems pretty good, but, you know, it's from Iran, and, you know, it's government run. These are both government run outlets. They've got a lot of dogs in a lot of fights, so I don't know. What we really need is a cryptocurrency like Lunar. The possibly failed Lunar project was, I don't know if it's really full-blown failed or not, but there seems to be some problems trading it at least. Maybe just, it getting delisted and stuff. But I think the goal of the Lunar project was to try and set up a situation where you had a blockchain-based information source. So in practice, it would have been a more decentralized, smaller Wikipedia. We need that, and we need a lot of people using it. Having something like that can save lives and bring the country together in a way that it should be together, right? I have this saying, united we stand, divided we fall. No. United we stand, divided we rise. I think division can be a good thing, but one area where you want unity is, some degree of unity at least, is on what really happened and how the universe really works. That's okay to have a United States on those issues. We just shouldn't have to all be in the same country. Speaking of all being in the same country and secession and NH exit, I've been saying for the last few months, this is the type of crisis that does not immediately lend itself to the secessionism or secession discussion. I think my traffic on NH, the number of posts that I've been putting on nhexit.com's Facebook group lately has been down since the COVID crisis started. But I've also felt like over the long term, this crisis will enhance the probability of secession. In a sense, I'm not thrilled about that because you get secession when there's some terrible problem that triggers it, right? So, an independent New Hampshire is a solution to some of these terrible problems that I wish didn't exist. So in a sense, I wish independence was never going to happen, but ultimately it's probably going to be necessary as a lesser evil. And I've recently, noticed a trend that is likely to take us closer to secession, and that is the continual interference with travel between states. So that did start happening toward the beginning, and there was some of that going on, I think, as early as April, maybe even March. But the latest thing is, like, someone in Connecticut has been issued a $1,000 fine, apparently, for failing to fill out travel papers. And of course, apparently there are checkpoints all over New York City. And I think some state is trying to stop people from Rhode Island from coming to it. Maybe New York. So one of the reasons why people are against secession is they don't want to have to show a passport or something like that when they go from New Hampshire to Massachusetts. And that's they're right about that, right? This is one of the reasons why I'm nervous about my own solution to some of these problems, because it does create new and different problems. But if you're having to do that kind of crap anyway, then what's the point in having a union? If the one good thing, one of them maybe three good things, about having all 50 states in one country goes away, then we're closer to the mark, where we have to, be Estonia, or we have to be Slovenia, right? With all of the dangers that entails, and all of the dangers that those two countries went through becoming independent, because the alternative is so much worse. The other good thing about having all 50 states in one union is that it tends to make it impossible for one state to wage kinetic war against another, and it allows a unified response to foreign threats. It creates something that is the most powerful entity on the planet, the federal government, and that is, while evil, fairly good for limiting the expansion of other giant empires like Russia and China. The problem is, of course, that it wants to wave its dick around the whole world, and has become the most tyrannical and abusive power in the world when it comes to things happening outside its borders. China's given it a run for its money now. Anyway, my suggested solution, and I brought this up on NH Exit because of the fact that China is waving its dick around. The solution, if it need be, would be an alliance of the 50 states along the lines of NATO, in place of a central federal government that actually, has rulership to some extent inside the states. I don't know if that's perfect, but it's something that would address the concern about giant foreign authoritarian empires. Because, as bad as the U.S. is in its treatment of Britain and Japan and all these other countries, I'm pretty sure that the Chinese would be worse. The Chinese government, currently constituted. Generally speaking, the embassy of the United States is not making claims on the government of Australia as to who should and shouldn't be allowed to go to college. Beijing's embassy is doing that sort of thing. Having successfully gotten an Australian student suspended from his college activities. From his college. And the kid's not even he's not even Chinese, like, ethnically speaking. Or at least he doesn't have a Chinese name, he's got a French name. New Hampshire courts have wiped clean the record of documentary star Derrick Horton, also known as Derrick J. Freeman, I think, or Derrick J. of Portsmouth. The former Keene resident went on got arrested, 6 or 7 times for doing things like riding his bike without permission, or riding his bike in violation of a cop's order, filming in a court lobby, smoking a joint. Most of this was captured on video. Anyway, he went and got all his record expunged, and now he has no criminal record, so that's nice. He was also allowed to get a concealed carry license, which he had been denied in retaliation for his war crimes. In a video posted to the internet, he made the point that during this process, all these different bureaucrats, many of them were so nice to him that it almost shook his faith in his anarchistic leanings. So that's nice. You too can have this. Just move to New Hampshire. But don't expect it to be 100% consistent. We're not competing with perfect here. Oh, I have an idea. Completely unrelated. Wait. No. I'm going to bring that up in a separate video. Oh, here's a report from Rachel Paluk, or Paluch. I don't know how she says her name. Paluch, on the reopennh.com Facebook group. Always a good source for complaints. She says, quote, "The Home Depot in Rochester does not give change. Bought an item for $30.69. Gave $31. They kept 31 cents because there's a change shortage. Highway robbery, if you ask me. Go to stores with a change jar," unquote. Now, she's talking about Rochester, New Hampshire, which is near the seacoast. Yeah, so you have to wonder if this is the first stage or the second stage of a banking crisis. I mean, is there anything that has not gone into shortage over the last 4 months? And there is some Stalinist freak over at a major mainstream newspaper in the United States who is calling for what he calls, I guess, like a 90% lockdown, where you're stopping healthcare workers from doing their jobs and food workers from doing their jobs. Now, what could go wrong? Well, no wonder we're having shortages with that kind of mentality floating around. Another Facebook post in New Hampshire from Melissa Blasick. Quote, "It's happening, folks. Moderators across the state are deciding to require masks with no exemptions. If you can't wear a mask, they give you an absentee ballot. This is voter intimidation and suppression. Are you ready for the most manipulated election in history?" Unquote. Well, what I'm more worried about, actually, we've had manipulated elections for quite a while now, I guess. How else did we always seem to get the two most unpopular people in the country running for president and getting the nomination? Yeah, so it seems anyway. But what really worried me was the Trump claims of, the Trump hints at postponing the election. Now that right there, that's civil war when that sort of stuff happens. Like if a president is still in office on friggin' February 5th or something like that, the year after the election, that's killing in the streets. That's factions gunning each other down. It's Sarajevo all over the United States, or at least in many parts of it. That one scares me a lot more than, oh, we don't know if this president's legitimate. Well, when was the last time we knew a president was legitimate, right? The process has to play out, and the power must shift after every election on schedule. That's why Mexico has a stable system, right? Relatively stable, is because despite the fact they're basically a one-party state, they at least let the president switch over every 6 years. That never gets interfered with, and if it did, you would have a second Mexican Revolution, I think. So it is here. It's kind of like the Orson Scott Card universe, where they have this, empire called the Capital Empire, and in Capital, in the Empire of Capital, you have one institution and process on which everyone relies, and if that is interfered with and corrupted, the whole thing falls. In the case of Capital, it's a thing called Somec, a drug that lets you slow down time. It lets you skip forward in time. And that the process and the drug, it's trusted. Well, the way you would bring down that system is to eliminate the trust in that drug. And that's what a guy does. And it's sort of the same, you could look at the Catholic Church in the past. There was faith in that. When that went away, you get revolutions and so forth. So, in the United States, the reason why you don't have civil wars for the last 150 odd years is that there is a release valve. The government changes over. It doesn't change very much, but you can vote out, in theory, the person who's in charge. And there's never a case where that person stays in charge after, I guess, January 21st of the following year. Whenever that election ends, no matter what happens, you get a different face at the top. That's I think, the driving thing that keeps Americans together. Once that's gone, bang, bang. Either we get Romania 1989, or we get something more like Syria 2012, going on for years and years. Our best hope would be Romania 1989 at that point. But who would you support, right? I mean, it's going to be two sets of bad guys going at it. Be ready. Fortunately, along the lines of being ready, I have discovered all kinds of cool things I can eat that are growing out of the ground everywhere in New Hampshire. And you can do the same thing. You've seen my dandelion videos. Those are completely edible, the whole thing. I think parts of it may need to be steamed. But more importantly, and more perennially, maple leaves are edible. Did you know that? And even parts of the maple bark. Those are hard to miss, and they're available in much larger quantities than dandelions. We probably won't starve here, but we could be starved of medical care. ReopenNH.com has announced a list of endorsed candidates for state legislative office. In Keene, in New Hampshire, all three of their endorsees are Free Staters. Robert Call, Matt Roach, and Varen Swearingen, who used to be the president of the Free State Project. To me, that's just a reminder of, we want to think about what would New Hampshire be like if the Free Staters had not picked it. Would there be just all this one-party stuff going on in some places that with no contest? Would this list of three endorsees, would that just be a blank list for Keene? Like there's no one we can endorse, they're all awful? If the Free Staters hadn't picked New Hampshire, if the Free Staters hadn't ever existed? That's the thing, it's something that matters to me, is how much of a difference are we making? And sometimes it looks like it's little, sometimes it looks like it's a lot, it always looks like it's not enough. But here's something concrete we can point to. Also, I guess the mainstreaming of our ideas, I think some of that has happened. If you look at the Keene mayors over the years, now the first one, Mr. Blastus, was actually pretty nice and accessible back in the 2005 era, but he was replaced by Dale Pregent, a guy who basically ordered Free Staters arrested. In practice, that was what happened. I used to ask him questions, as he was walking into city council meetings, and he would pretend like I wasn't standing there. This is a really old, useless-looking dude, and he would walk past me at top speed of almost a third of a mile an hour. He could barely get, to and from the council chambers. He was just like it was like being ruled by Yuri Andropov or one of these, Konstantin Chernenko, one of these geriatric Bolshevik revolution survivors who was still running the Soviet Union 70 years later, just on inertia alone. Just an awful man, just a second-rate human. But then Kendall Lane becomes mayor, and Lane, would answer every question I'd ask him. He would appear on at Free Stater sponsored events. Like there was a thing called they had the Keene Liberty Alliance. Maybe that's still there. I forget. Maybe it still exists. But they hosted a debate between Lane and his Free Stater challenger, Robert Call. I think he's a Free Stater. Lane was happy to attend, answer all the questions, and it was just very accessible and nice and wow, that's an improvement. Thank you, Mayor Lane. You're better. But now we have one who's even better than that. George Hansel, runs his own talk show, and I call in and ambush interview him every other week, or, I try to. It winds up being about every 3 weeks. And again, he's very accommodating, accessible. The show's very open. He's very nice. He listens. He even seems to kind of agree with me sometimes. Now, that may just be talk. all that really matters is what he supports. But he seems to be kind of a caretaker mayor. And again, that's another step in the right direction. It's just, it's absolutely a day and night difference compared to what we had in the 2009 era. So another positive change. Happy to be able to report one. But this isn't so positive. Apparently Merrimack, the government of Merrimack, has shut down Watson Park. They put up barricades. People have been allegedly contentious with officers. And there have been confrontations between crowds and officers. Who knew? Well, what could anybody be angry about with police these days, right? They only kill 1,000 Americans a year. They're only telling you not to do the things you love. Apparently there's a lot of people in the park. Well, I wonder why. Maybe it's because the government has closed down the bars, or at least made them so restrictive that you wouldn't want to bother going into one. If you want to close down a park and you're a government, here's how you do it. You sell the park to the highest bidder and you return the money to taxpayers. You don't charge taxpayers to keep taxpayers out of their park. Or another solution, and maybe they did this for all I know, but it would have been, hey, put up a request. We are requesting that this happen at the park. Maybe fewer people, and here's another suggested location, and we are requesting that volunteers come to the park to help clean it up. That would be a start. At least it would help deal with the trash issue. But the idea of an obscure park in Merrimack becoming some sort of hotbed of, large numbers of people just gathering spontaneously, that doesn't happen, right? That's like not normal. That's something that can only be triggered by other government action. It's the same as that trailhead you saw me trying to get to in, I think it was in Raymond. There's just, this obscure trailhead on a road that usually has, very little traffic. It's probably the most remote road in the Manchester area. I would call it the most remote road I know of within 30 miles of Manchester. Well, they closed that down. They closed the road, the public road. Why? Well, because their restrictions had caused so many people to become desperate for anything interesting to do. They were all going to that trailhead. And this back road had become a busy road. And we can't have a busy road. So one restriction led to this completely unrelated restriction, it seemed. But it wasn't unrelated at all. The problem is the initial restrictions. Not the fact that people are desperately trying to get around them. That is all I have for you today. Oh, but I will have more, much more, in the future, because you can rely on the government to give me more. More to complain about. But preferably, more to provide alternate solutions against.
LRN.FM. 24 hours of Liberty Radio every day. Now available on satellite too. At sat.lrn.fm. That's what a satellite sounds like. Put it on your unlicensed station. Wear it in your hair. But above all, don't despair. The Liberty message is getting out. And right now, you're missing it. Or maybe you're not. But skip on over to
LRN.FM. Feds don't want you to hear them.